This is Land of Havilah, 2 Chronicles 4. A new temple needs new furnishings. The Ark of the Covenant will be the same one that was in the tabernacle, but the rest of the furnishings will be replaced with new ones. The new ones will be similar to the tabernacle furnishings, but on steroids. We'll add some detail to this chapter from 1 Kings 6 and 7. Verse 1. Then he made an altar of brass, 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 10 cubits high. Comment, that was the replacement for the bronze altar at the tabernacle. It'll sit outside the temple and be used for burning animal sacrifices. It was basically a giant barbecue with a bronze grating for holding the animal parts. The old one was 7.5 feet square and 4 feet high. The new one's 30 feet square and 15 feet high. We'd think there must be steps for the priests to go up, but then again Yahweh said, quote, "You shall not go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness may not be exposed to it." Exodus 20:26, so it's a mystery to your narrator. Coming up, a new basin. The old one stood between the bronze altar and the door of the tabernacle and held water for ceremonial washing. By Yahweh's ordinance, the priests washed their hands and feet before entering the tent or before approaching the bronze altar. This was so they wouldn't die, Exodus 30, verse 21. And also by Yahweh's ordinance, they washed certain of the animal parts before they put them on the altar, such as in Exodus 29:17. The dimensions of the old basin were never given, but it was small enough to be portable. Coming up, the new basin will be so massive it's called the sea, as in ocean. It'll be bowl-shaped, 15 feet in diameter, with the brim 7.5 feet off the ground. It'll be supported by 12 life-sized bronze oxen. It'll hold either 18,000 or 12,000 gallons, depending on if we use the number from here or from 1 Kings 7. Verse 2. Also he made the molten sea of 10 cubits from brim to brim. It was round, 5 cubits high, and 30 cubits in circumference. Under it was the likeness of oxen, which encircled it for 10 cubits, encircling the sea. The oxen were in 2 rows, cast when it was cast. It stood on 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, and 3 looking toward the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east, and the sea was set on above them, and all their hindquarters were inward. It was a handbreadth thick, and its brim was made like the brim of a cup, like the flower of a lily. It received and held 3,000 baths. Comment, coming up, something the tabernacle didn't have. There'll be 10 accessory water basins, smaller, also made of bronze or brass, set on bronze stands with bronze wheels. The wheels were about 21 inches in diameter and had spokes like chariot wheels. Apparently they rolled these smaller basins over to the sea to be filled, then rolled them away to do the washings. This provided them with 10 separate washing areas. The stands of the rolling bases were highly decorated with images of lions, oxen, and cherubim. Verse 6. He also made 10 basins and put 5 on the right hand and 5 on the left to wash in them. The things that belonged to the burnt offering were washed in them, but the sea was for the priests to wash in. Comment, the sea and smaller rolling basins were bronze like the altar of burnt offerings. All those structures sat outdoors in the courtyard. Now coming the indoor furnishings, starting with the lampstands, which is menorah in Hebrew. These lampstands won't sit on tables. They'll be floor models as in the tabernacle. The one in the tabernacle was made of 70 pounds of pure hammered gold. It had 7 olive oil lamps on it, 1 lamp in the center and 3 on each side. The temple will have 10 menorahs, 5 on the right and 5 on the left, and by the way, it'll be the same for the tables of showbread, 5 on the right and 5 on the left. Verse 7. He made the 10 lampstands of gold according to the ordinance concerning them, and he set them in the temple, 5 on the right hand and 5 on the left. Comment, he made the lampstands according to the ordinance, which apparently refers to the original specifications given by Yahweh to Moses on Mount Sinai, Exodus 25:31-40. In verse 40 of that, Yahweh told Moses, referring to the lampstand and its accessories, quote, "See that you make them after their pattern, which has been shown to you on the mountain," end quote. So that was the ordinance. Now coming the tables for showbread, the tabernacle had 1 table which was made of acacia wood and plated with gold. The 10 new tables will be gold, 1 Kings 7:48, and if any part of them was wood, there's no mention of it. verse 10. He also made 10 tables and placed them in the temple, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left. Comment, that would be the right and left of the bigger room, which is the front room or the holy place. Still in verse 8. He made 100 basins of gold. Comment, these sound like handheld basins, being made of gold that have to be small enough so as not to be too heavy and probably sat on the tables. Maybe they were for drink or for holding olive oil. Now, going outdoors again, the courts were paved with massive paving stones and surrounded by a stone wall. Verse 9. Furthermore, he made the court of the priests, the great court, and doors for the court, and overlaid their doors with brass. He set the sea on the right side of the house eastward toward the south. Comment, the door of the old tabernacle faced east, with the basin in front of the door and the bronze altar in front of the basin. In other words, from east to west, there was the bronze altar, the basin, and the door. The temple will be similar. In verse 10, the sea was in front of the temple porch, but not directly, because it was offset a little to the south. So, in other words, it was southeast of the porch. In verse 9, visitors entered the temple courtyards through gates plated with brass. They were guarded by Levitical gatekeepers, 1 Chronicles 9:24. Coming up, the accessories for the bronze altar on which they burned sacrificial animals. There had to be utensils and vessels to handle the meat and to take care of the fire and ashes. Verse 11. Huram made the pots, the shovels, and the basins. So Huram finished doing the work that he did for King Solomon in God's house. Comment, the king of Tyre sent Huram-Abi to be with Solomon's craftsmen. In verse 11, it seems Solomon made him the chief. Coming up, another description of the 2 pillars on the porch with the bowl-shaped capitals on top. They were decorated with bronze work in a net-type pattern and bronze pomegranates. Verse 12. The 2 pillars, the bowls, the 2 capitals which were on top of the pillars, the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on top of the pillars, and the 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on the pillars. Comment, now another mention of the sea and the 10 smaller bronze basins, the basins that sat on rolling bases. Verse 14. He also made the bases, and he made the basins on the bases, 1 sea and the 12 oxen under it. Comment, coming up, another mention of the accessories for the bronze altar of burnt offerings. Instead of calling him Huram, his father, it would be less confusing to use the Hebrew for his name, which is Huram-Abi. Verse 16. Huram, his father, also made the pots, the shovels, the forks, and all the vessels for King Solomon for Yahweh's house of bright brass. Comment, the brass wasn't left rough, it was polished and shiny. Verse 17. The king cast them in the plain of the Jordan in the clay ground between Succoth and Zereda. Comment, that was an interesting detail. Huram-Abi cast the bronze work in the ground about 40 miles northeast of Jerusalem in the valley of the Jordan River between Succoth and Zereda. Apparently that was the closest place he could find suitable clay soil. Verse 18. Thus Solomon made all the vessels in great abundance, for the weight of the brass could not be determined. Solomon made all the vessels that were in God's house, the golden altar also. Comment, that was the golden altar for burning incense, still in verse 19. And the tables with the showbread on them, and the lampstands with their lamps to burn according to the ordinance before the inner sanctuary of pure gold, and the flowers, the lamps, and the tongs of gold that was perfect gold. Comment, verse 21, and in the description of the first menorah in Exodus, the menorahs were fashioned like olive trees, with branches, flowers, and buds, all of pure hammered gold. Verse 22. And the snuffers, the basins, the spoons, and the fire pans of pure gold. As for the entry of the house, its inner doors for the most holy place and the doors of the main hall of the temple were of gold. Comment, to be more specific about the doors, there were 2 bifold doors from the porch, which makes 4 panels, 1 Kings 6:34. Probably they were set side by side so that there was one entryway. They were made of cypress wood, 1 Kings 6:34, and overlaid with gold, as verse 22 just said. There were also 2 doors from the holy place to the most holy place, these made of olive wood, 1 Kings 6:32, and probably also set in one opening like French doors also plated with gold, as verse 22 just said. By the descriptions, there was nothing but gold visible in either room, including the floors, walls, ceiling, doors, thresholds, furnishings, and vessels, with the one exception being the veil, which was blue, purple, and crimson linen. 2 Chronicles 3:14. 2 Chronicles 5 is next at landofhavilah.net.